All right. So the first question in our small group discussion about suffering and our readings from this week was what has come up for you so far in the readings as you think about the problem of suffering?
I can start and just say a little bit first. I think like the top thing that's come up for me is just constantly coming back to the question of like why was suffering even created? Why is it tolerated to this extent? Like
Mm,
we're talking about some pretty heavy topics in class now, and it kind of brings suffering to a whole new level.
mm,
And it's hard to find like any justification for it, even when we start talking about these topics.
mm.
So I think like no matter what conclusion you come to as to why it exists, it's still hard to like think about, you know? There's no easy way to get around, oh, this is why it happens.
Yeah, there's no reason that feels good. There's no
Yeah, exactly.
satisfying conclusion.
Yeah.
Oh,
Right. And I think we all have a how do you say it? Theodicity? Yeah.
yeah.
Yep.
That relates to us or resonates with us. And for some people it's different and they believe that God is the reason why suffering exists or he's to blame. So it's kind of for me it's challenging to see people suffer and then me seeing them suffer and blaming somebody that I love and feel that is love.
Mm,
So it's been a challenging journey for me,
yeah.
even through my own suffering, but seeing them suffer again and again and again.
Yeah. I think it's even like just yeah, speaking to personal experiences like you, I think it's even worse when you like look back on suffering, no matter how far away it was, and you still kind of can't see the purpose it served or the reason for it. And that's so discouraging. Like, all right, when am I going to see why that was worth it? Like,
Hmm.
and I
Mhm.
think a lot of it has to do with just our human minds being so small that we have such a finite view of good and bad and right and wrong and evil and so I don't think we can understand um quite like why suffering would be real.
Yeah, for sure. Like the balance between God being all good,
Mhm.
all positive things, and all controlling just don't really line up with thinking about suffering.
No, and then I think about like the spiritual warfare, but that doesn't explain everything like natural disasters or
Yeah.
things like that. So it kind of like then I go back to like, well, why does that happen?
Yeah. No, I think that's a great point too. Like spiritual warfare is such a thing, and that seems like something that's very like not of God and of the devil. And but then comes the problem for me of like, yes, I believe God is completely in control personally, but like how much does God allow Satan to do these things for for God's purposes? And how much is it God like punishing us? Like I don't know. That seems like such an Old Testament concept to me, but it still is like very prevalent way of thinking. So it's just hard.
For sure. There's a lot of different factors that come into play there.
Mhm.
But like even like you're saying with spiritual warfare, to me, of the theodicies that we read about, um, that the one that was explained through that view, I'm forgetting exactly what it's called right
Cosmic
now.
conflict.
Yes, cosmic conflict. That made the most sense to me. But then, like at the end of every theodicy, it still comes down to like, okay, but then why is God allowing this battle still? If like I kept coming back to like, well, Jesus ultimately conquered darkness, paid the
Mhm.
price for our sins. And so like why is this still a thing? But I think we just have to consider all the things that we have given. And like you said, Lydia, the fact that we just don't have the capacity to understand it all.
Yeah.
Yeah. Does anybody else have anything to add for that one? No? Okay. Sweet. Let's talk about the second question. As you consider the problem of suffering in the world, what is most challenging for you? What is reassuring to you?
I think well, the most challenging thing for me is when I see children suffering in the hands of people that are supposed to love them.
Mm.
And I guess what's reassuring to me is I feel like God does place angels or people in their paths to help, but yeah, that's I think the most challenging thing for me is when children are suffering in this world.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too. That's definitely like a really heavy one because when you talk about people with that much innocence, it's
Right.
just like I can't think of a reason why
Mm.
we would justify like causing pain.
Right.
Yeah. Um, also, um, we've been talking a lot about like historical trauma and intergenerational trauma and stuff
Mhm.
like that. And when we're reading about like how those things are actually altering people's brains, it's hard for me
Yeah.
to like it's hard for me to like understand why God would allow that even. Like the fact that not only is suffering being caused, but now it's actually like changing our brain chemistry.
Yeah.
And so that was like a whole new layer
Mm.
for me to just try to think about.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's the same reason what you guys were talking about. It's the same reason why sometimes when I watch movies, like the dog dying is even more sad than like the other characters dying. And it's
Yeah.
they're like so such innocence, and it seems like they didn't do anything to deserve that. And that whole idea of what people deserve is really messy too. But yeah, like you were saying, like the intergenerational trauma, like the study we read about where people, like descendants of folks who went through, like being in Nazi war camps, apparently, the study was saying that like these descendants are experiencing the same like symptoms that would be expected of someone who actually went through the, Nazi war camps and things like that. And that just blows my mind. Like that's really scary and really sad and intense. Yeah.
Yeah, and just and the also with like the Native Americans that were forced into these boarding schools and how there's studies of how it led to a lot of like the substance abuse and mental health issues, and it's like it, through the history is still um that epigenetics like is still happening, that trauma is still.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that movie we had to watch recently was a really hard one to just sit in and just be honest with the fact that this is real still. This isn't just like
Mhm.
20 years ago. Like we're seeing this now and
Oh
it
yeah. I work with a lot of families and some are Native American, and you just still you just it just breaks my heart. Like it's just a lot.
Mm,
And when I see that, it's like it's terrible. It's
mm,
terrible that it even happened.
yeah.
yeah.
What do you do, Juanita, to like protect yourself from like secondary trauma? Like, what do you do to kind of guard your heart as you process all of that you work with?
Um, I think a lot of it is my faith. I
Mhm.
surrender it all to God.
Mm,
Um, or without it, with all the trauma that I've endured myself, I
mm,
don't think I could deal with more.
mhm.
So a lot of the times either I consult with my supervisor too.
Mm.
And yeah, I just gotta just let it go
Yeah, get it off your shoulders. Yeah. I
and
think,
just know that I did the best what I could do.
yeah, that's good that you can actually like feel that because I think a lot of people won't like can't tell themselves that. Yeah, no, and I think your faith is such a good way to get that off your shoulders and like it genuinely like hurts my heart to think about people going through suffering who don't know Christ and just like think that this is all that there is and don't have a like a as as valuable of a way to go through that. Like if I didn't have Christ, I don't know. I don't know like how I would get through suffering. Like I don't, yeah, it just blows my mind. Like I don't know.
Yeah, and and we deal with those like clients that have that hard relationship with Christ or don't believe because of the suffering. And
Mm,
it's taken me a long time to finally just come to a place of understanding and empathy of that not everybody is going to believe what I believe,
mm,
and that's okay.
mm,
And I could be a light even though they're not in the same belief system that I am.
yeah.
Because before I started my journey in social work, I thought I was doing good to try to, I guess, I don't know, not convert, but like, I don't know, like give them the good news or, and I knew that was wrong.
Mm,
So now I just kind of listen and not try to impose my faith to anybody, but
mm,
just be me and loving.
yeah.
Yeah, and it's also really reassuring for a social work field in particular when we're supposed to always stay client-centered and, unbiased, to know that the Bible does tell us that people will know who we are because of our fruit, and we
Mm,
don't always have to share the gospel with people necessarily to show them,
mm,
who Christ is. So that's definitely reassuring.
yeah. Yeah, totally. And that like a lot of it is out of our control. Like God can be breaking through us and we have no idea, you know?
Mhm.
Hmm.
And especially as practitioners, yeah, I think it's like such a vulnerable position